Blog Talk Radio.
Down to sleep, lay me down. I pray my soul is mine to keep. My soul can never step outside this bed, never into all the evil. Now back from the dead.
Are you scared?
He's here.
The calling hours.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk here.
They will say that I have shed innocent blood. What's blood for, if not for shedding?
Episode of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast on Horror Society Radio. Once again, it is I, the Head Undertaker, your host, the Dead Man Michael Jones of HorrorSociety.com and Living Dead Magazine. What's going on out there, ladies and gentlemen? We are less than 2 weeks away from Halloween and a couple of days removed from the After Dark Horror Fest 8 Films to Die For being released. I've had the opportunity to see several of the films, and in the next coming weeks, both here on the Calling Hours Horror Podcast, on HorrorSociety.com, and in Living Dead Magazine, and a couple of other publications that the Dead Man writes for, you will be seeing reviews of these spectacular films. I just recently had the opportunity to watch Lumberjack Man and Re-Kill on Friday night, and I was highly entertained by both films. Be damned what other horror movie sites thought about them. They are high-quality entertainment and the pinnacle of what we are looking for in true independent horror. We'll get back on that soapbox later on. But as of tonight, for episode 84 of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast, we will be interviewing actress, producer, and writer Vida Ghaffari. I hope I pronounced her last name correctly. I'm sure she will correct me when she comes on. Once again, another great interview talent being sent to me from Joe Williamson, my man out there in California. So thank you to Joe for doing that. You might know Vida from Near Death 2004. She was attached to Garden Part Massacre, but as of a message earlier today, that appears not to be the case. So we will get the dirt on all that. And there is also the upcoming Circus of Dread. So we will discuss her work as a TV film actress, a voiceover artist, an on-air host, producer, media consultant, and more. There's going to be plenty to talk about. And she's from my original neck of the woods. While I do reside in Raleigh, North Carolina now, I was born in Woodbridge, Virginia, and she is from the Washington, D.C. area. So it's going to be fun to talk to somebody from the area where I was born and the informative years of the Dead Man started out there. So it's going to be fun to talk about that kind of stuff. In our digital dismemberment reviews this evening, We will be covering Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Human Centipede 2 from the Human Centipede, the complete sequence box set. We will also be covering SGL Entertainment's Blu-ray release of Meet Me There, a very different style of horror film, but I think very well made and very entertaining. It also happens to have Dustin Runnels in the film. Of course, for those of you that know what a wrestling fan I am, Dustin Runnels, of course, is Goldust, is Goldust, WWE. Great, fantastic wrestler, and I loved his part in this film, so we will be talking about that here in a few moments. In our Metal Massacre Spotlight this evening, we will be featuring Metal Blade recording artist Denner Sherman and songs from the most recent CD, Satan's Tomb. In fact, let me give you a little bit of background info on that right now. Guitar legends Michael Denner and Hank Sherman of Merciful Fate have given an offering of supremely classic heavy metal infused with an overload of their signature dark magic shredding. According to the legendary guitar duo, getting Snowy Shaw of King Diamond, Therion, and Sabaton on drums, and Mark Grabowski from Demonica on bass guitar, and Sean Peck of Cage and Death Dealer on vocals, they formed a band that was a critical component to bringing these 4 tracks to life. Michael Denner added, "Creating these songs with this lineup really ignited my metal fire hotter than ever. I'm sure the fans are going to love this thing. This mix ended up really having an old school feel to it that sounds awesome when blasting it at an unhealthy volume," says Sherman. Being invited to collaborate with these 2 guys who had such a profound major impact on my indoctrination to metal has been absolutely killer. And now we are continuing to write more material for a full-length release too. My mind is officially blown, says singer Sean Peck. The EP was recorded in the USA, Denmark, and Sweden and was mixed by Arnold Lindberg at Sound Industry Studios in Gothenburg, Sweden. The mastering was done by Mayor Applebaum in Los Angeles, California. The Satan's Tomb cover artwork was painted by Thomas Holm, whose work on Merciful Fate's Melissa and Don't Break the Oath is well known throughout the metal world. So, without further ado, let's get into some World Podcast exclusive music. From Denner Sherman, the name of the CD is Satan's Tomb, and the song is Satan's Tomb.
Of light, so come and join me and lay down your life. Well,
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Once again, World Podcast exclusive music from Denner Sherman from the CD Satan's Tomb. That song was Satan's Tomb. Make sure to stay tuned throughout the rest of the podcast as we will be playing 2 more songs from Satan's Tomb. Make sure to head on over to Metal Blade Records. Check out everything that's going on with Denner Sherman. Find out when they're touring. Pick up the CD, merchandise, and other great bands, all available from Metal Blade Records. But ladies and gentlemen, it's time once again for some digital dismemberment.
Digital dismemberment.
And in our first digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening, we are going to be covering SGL Entertainment's Blu-ray release of Meet Me There. This is the second film I have reviewed from SGL, and I am definitely looking forward to receiving more from Jeffrey Swanson and the guys out there. I still have 4 more to cover, but at this rate, I am going to go through their films like they're water, and that is definitely a good thing. Give you a little bit of background info on this film. A journey of self-discovery becomes a quest for survival as Ada, played by Lisa Frederick of Least Favorite Love Songs, and Calvin, played by Michael Falk, Zero Charisma, encounter the darkness of the past and the unexplainable evil of the present in a town where the only visitors are the ones who have come to die. Featuring Dustin Runnels, WWE's Goldust, and Jill Thompson, Scary Godmother, this intense character study, exploration of sexual dysfunction, and cautionary tale about always dancing with amusement and park mascots will have you covering your eyes and keep you guessing until its final moments. Directed by Lex Librand from Summer League, written by Brandon Stroud of Uprocks, and based on the real-life stories and nightmares of Destiny Talley. I really enjoyed this movie. This is definitely more of a thinking man's horror film than blood and guts, zombies, slashers, things like that. There's a real story here, and you got to pay attention. You know, like I said, if you're looking for a bloodbath, this is not your film. If you're looking for something that makes you think, this is it. The film opens up with 2 strangers who meet in a bar, and they wind up killing themselves in a meadow in Sheol, Oklahoma, by shotgun. A really gripping scene to start everything off in the film. It's definitely unexpected, and it gives you that first shock factor out the gate. Did a little bit of research and had read some other reviews about the film as well to compare some notes, and it turns out that the name of the town is a Hebrew word meaning a place of darkness to which all the dead go or congregate. So I found that to be an interesting aspect of the film to start out. But to the meat of the film, we see Ada and Calvin in their bedroom to start the main crux of the film, and they're in a moment of intimacy, and right before things really start happening, Ada kind of pushes away from Calvin and curls up in bed. And you can tell Calvin is a little frustrated by all this, but he goes about being a gentleman. Ada and Calvin wind up going to a therapist, and she's having problems with intimacy, in particular being able to participate in sexual things, for one. But she also reveals that she has no memories of her childhood whatsoever. Calvin thinks that's a little odd because he details a story and events from when he was younger and says that he vividly remembers things from his childhood. The therapist goes on to say that the missing memories may be a result of something that happened to her that was so traumatic as a child that her mind may have blocked them as her only defense mechanism. She goes on to suggest that she should try looking at some old pictures or home movies. They decide when they leave, Calvin suggests that they just go ahead and make a drive to visit Ada's hometown of Sheol. And it's a small town, approximately 73 people, 5 streets, a church, a graveyard, and a gas station. Really in the middle of nowhere. On the car ride, they seem like an everyday normal couple. The conversation seems fantastic. You can tell that there's a true intimacy and emotion between them. And one of the things that is really nice in this film out the gate is during the car ride, a lot of times it can seem like dialogue is forced or contrived. Well, in this film, it all seems very natural, as if the two actors, the actor and the actress, have known each other for years. It just seems like a conversation a couple would have in a car on a long road trip. So that really helps right away with a believability in the characters and liking the main characters of the film. So I thought that was really well done out the gate. As they're making the trip, Ada is talking about certain things from her childhood that she does remember. She remembers the town and she remembers people. She just doesn't really remember anything about herself. She reveals that her mother used to work as a crime scene cleaner when she wasn't selling drugs with her father. Excuse me. Calvin kind of jokes with her that it would be odd that a town that small would need a crime scene cleaner. And she goes on a story talking about a bunch of dog killings, murders, and things like that happened in the town. Well, as they get into the town, they stop at a gas station, and Calvin goes in to get a snack for Ada. And in the confusion of being in there, the local townsfolk just don't seem to like Calvin very much. In fact, they comment on his baseball cap, and he actually has a shotgun pulled on him. And he's told that if he doesn't leave, that he'll be shot. So he goes back to the car physically shaken, and he doesn't tell Ada what happens. Well, they wind up driving to where her old house is, and they can't find it. So they go to her aunt's house, who's her Aunt Lindsay, who's played by Jill Thompson. And it's kind of an awkward moment. You can tell that there was some tension in the family, but at this point you don't really know where it's from. Calvin goes ahead and lays down, and Ada stays up to talk to Lindsay for a while. And it just you can tell there's some tension there. In fact, when Lindsay sees Ada's tattoos, it starts getting very biblical about cutting the body and marking the body. So eventually, Ada goes to sleep. They get up the next day, and they decide that they're going to go and explore. During their exploration, they find a church, and while they're out there, Calvin finds a strange coin on a windowsill. And they can't seem to find anyone at church when suddenly, around the corner, comes Preacher Woodward, who is played by Dustin Runnels, Goldust. And he lets him in the church, and, some weird things are said to Calvin about committing suicide and things like that. So they leave. When they get back to the house, they find their car on fire, and the aunt had tried to stab Calvin thinking that she was the husband. Well, they break off in the woods trying to get away, and they're chased by her uncle, which leads to a lot of other strange circumstances of going back to the grocery store and the store owner attacking Ada, Calvin coming to her rescue, and she winds up stabbing the shop owner, and Calvin takes the shotgun. They make their way back to the church, and the preacher agrees to show them a way out. But as they're leaving and he's giving them directions, they pass by a pond, and Ada makes the strange remark about she doesn't remember if she's ever been baptized, and he attempts to baptize her or drown her, Calvin winds up killing the preacher in the process of escaping. I don't want to say too much more past this point because of the ending of the film and the twists that are involved there. Suffice it to say that at the end of the movie, you're left to wonder whether or not this was all a hallucinatory dream, whether any of the facts were real, whether they even survived getting out of the town. And again, it points to a lot of really great psychological aspects in this film. Again, the acting was top-notch. I liked the grain look and feel of the movie. And again, the camaraderie between Ada and Calvin in this film is absolutely stunning. It's truly a good look at good dialogue with good actors makes for believability. So it's definitely worth checking out. I would give this film a 3.5 out of 5 stars for sure. Like I said, if you're going into this looking for blood and gore, wrong film for you, turn the other way. But if you're looking for something that's going to make you think, something where you have to pay attention to what you're watching, I highly, highly recommend this film. As far as the disc goes, I love the cover art, very creepy. The film has won a lot of awards, and I can certainly see why. As far as special features go, there is a small interview with Dustin Runnels, and there is a small interview with Jill Thompson, along with the trailer for the film. I would give this the disc overall a 7 out of 10. Again, it's really worth picking up, sitting down, and watching something a little bit different. Again, this is the kind of thing I like to see coming from independent film. I think all of the people involved with this have a very bright future ahead of them. Make sure to head on over to SGL Entertainment to pick up your copy of Meet Me There. Coming up in about 5 minutes, we're going to go into our feature interview with actress, producer, and writer Vida Ghaffari. But before that, we're going to go into our second Metal Massacre Spotlight. Once again, with World Podcast exclusive music. The name of the band is Denner Sherman. The CD is Satan's Tomb. The song is War Witch. exclusive music from Denner Sherman. The name of the CD is Satan's Tomb. The song was War Witch. Make sure to stay tuned after our feature interview, as we will be playing one more song in our Metal Massacre Spotlight. But before we get to that, it is time for our feature interview. In tonight's feature interview, we will have actress, producer, writer, and so much more, Vida Ghaffari. Vida, please tell me I'm saying your last name right.
Oh, my God, you said the first name and the last name right. I feel like I should give you a prize or something. Thank you.
It's hard. It's I like this new feature on Facebook where they show the proper enunciation of people's names. So
yes.
That helps me sometimes, because there are names that come across that I'm like, holy shit, how am I supposed to pronounce that without sounding like a dick? Well, first of all, thank you for coming on to the show. I want to say thank you to Joe Williamson. Joe has always been really good about finding me outstanding guests for the show, and when I spoke to him the last time, your name came right to the top of his list. So,
big thanks to Joe Williamson for the interview, and big thanks to you as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's absolutely not a problem. And as I was telling the guests or the listeners at the beginning of the show, it's very rare that I have an opportunity to have someone on who's from the same neck of the country as I am. Since you're right outside of that Washington, D.C. area, and I was born in Woodbridge, Virginia, it was fun reminiscing with you about some of the areas out there, including Potomac Mills and things like that.
Yes, the mall that I spent too much time and money at. I'm like, why is that so familiar to me, that Woodbridge, Virginia? But, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have, like, a D.C. area homie. I mean, I consider, because I'm a Maryland person, you're a Virginia person, that's a great divide, but I feel like I have more in common with a Virginia person than a D.C. person. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Unfortunately, I wish we could talk about the Redskins being any good, but, they're just sucking it this year, so
no,
we won't even get into that.
The Redskins, it's like long gone, huh?
At this point, bring back RG3, but that's not why I brought you on. Let's get down to this. First of all, tell everyone how you first became involved in film and television to begin with.
Sure. It's funny. My mom was a child actress in the old country in Iran, and the problem with that was, even though it was a much more open time, it was still not good for women, I guess, to be so much in the arts, but she really enjoyed it. I come from a very unusual family. They're either very artistic or they're very scientific or they're very political. My dad was a scientist and a mathematician, and he was very anti-me entering the arts because he saw what the relatives in the family that were artists, what the strain that they went through, the tortured artist soul, and he wanted me to have stability. So he's like, I really think you should study economics. You don't like physics. He's a physicist and a mathematician. You don't like math, but I think you should study economics. And he was very practical about it because apparently he had a friend at the World Bank. He was going to try to plant me in the World Bank, and there's a certain kind of tax that you don't pay when you work for the World Bank. But unfortunately, it's for foreign nationals, and I was born and raised in the U.S., so it wouldn't have even worked for me anyway. But so long story short, I studied economics at the University of Maryland, College Park, go Terps, minored in journalism, minored in theater, which were my loves, but I would always find myself going to the journalism building. I wrote for my school paper. I was a DJ on my school radio station, and in Maryland, the journalism program is very strong. I wrote for the Diamondback, back when people actually read newspapers. We had a readership of like 40,000 people. So I felt like I was reaching a lot of people at a very young age. Same with WUMC, the radio station. It was one of the oldest owned independent studio radio stations. So that was wonderful. I mean, that was a great foray into all of this. And I did do plays. We had an experimental black box theater, but I was more of a behind-the-scenes person because, I was an economics major. So I couldn't really – there was only so much time I could devote to, doing campus radio and devote to activities. But I really loved it, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that was very meaningful to me. But in D.C., I don't know if you can remember, it's a very government-oriented town. So it's hard to get work as an actor like this. I joined SAG there, actually. But it's really weird. Like most of the jobs there are, especially after 9/11, or like industrials, government training films, or those films that they have like sexual harassment in the workplace. So it's not like acting for acting's sake. It's more like practical jobs that are union jobs. So it was few and far between. But I always wanted to live here, and I will say 4 generations of my family live in Southern California. And I could have almost been born in Southern California had my dad taken some jobs out here, which he reluctantly did not take. So I've always wanted to be out here, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give California a shot. So I was a reporter for Persian TV. I was an entertainment reporter, like not religious, not political. For about 5 years, I worked on and off when I didn't have shows on hiatus at different Persian TV stations. I covered a lot of red carpets, but I always really enjoyed acting. And what led me to do more things was I did voiceover. Like how I got started in voiceover was very interesting. It was in a roundabout way. They had promos at these Persian TV stations, and I think they were very cheap because they didn't want to hire one person to do 2 promos. And I guess my Farsi was pretty good, so I'd do the promos in English and in Farsi. Mostly they would play them in English because it was, for advertisers and whatnot. So that's how I started doing voiceover, and it just propelled forward from there.
Now, one of the things that I found interesting in doing my research on you, of course, we'll get into more of that, the actress, the voiceover artist and stuff like that, but the fact that you've done media, and I find that to be an interesting aspect of everything that you do. I know that for the longest time I was, primarily I was just a writer for websites covering the horror genre in every aspect that I could. And I finally woke up one day and I said,
very accomplished, I might add it. It's not an easy feat to do.
No, it's really not. And I woke up one morning and I was like, who am I to be sitting here critiquing other people's work when I've never done it myself? So that's when I became an effects artist and did producing, and I did a little bit of acting. And I feel like in the long run that's really helped me as a journalist when I have guests on the show because, while I have not worked on anything huge, major, big budget or anything, I think it helps put actors and directors and people like that at ease knowing that they're talking to someone who knows what it's like to be in the trenches doing things. For you as a journalist, you went to school for it, but when you do the things that you do journalistically, I've seen some stuff where you've done stuff on the red carpet and things like that. How do you feel like your experience on both ends helps you as an actress and as a journalist?
I think it really helps, I'll be honest, in interviews, because I feel like a lot of my actor friends that are very seasoned actors, but, for some reason it's come to them later in life that they're on press junkets, or red carpets I don't think are so tricky. Maybe it is for some people, but I think when it comes to press junkets or, when you're promoting a film or something, I feel a lot of them get lost in the shuffle. And for me, I'm very grateful that I was on that side. It really helps, to give them good sound bites, what they're looking for because you're one of them. On the other hand, in Hollywood, often one tends to get labeled. So for me, it was very complicated in the beginning because they would get confused. They'd be like, "But you're a journalist. How is it that you're in this movie?" Or unless I was playing a journalist, I feel like you almost have to be sort of kind of on the nose with people in the industry. But I feel like with social media, and I feel like with the internet, and I feel like with all that's going on, that's changing. And with personalities and personalities in the media and what have you, it's really changing. And I'm a blogger too, and I feel like that kind of settles the great divide of, what are you? What is it that you do? Ironically, I'm blogging, and it's funny because with blogs, it's less writing, obviously, but it's a lot more promotion. And I'm not used to subscribe to my podcast, or you know what I mean, or
right.
subscribe, my blog, or please subscribe to my blog, or please like this page, or please like my, I was trained by an old-timey UPI guy, and it's just I write like an old person. That's what people tell me. I write like someone much more mature than me. So for me, it's weird. You know what I mean? Like I can't. Subscribe to my blog. It's like, oh, okay, and it's funny when I meet people, they'll ask me potential sponsors or whatever, they'll be like, well, what are your numbers? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm just so busy trying to get these posts. You're a journalist, I'm so busy getting these posts done. I haven't really pursued that avenue. And people are like, really? Why haven't you pursued that avenue? Or, there's a lot of avenues, I think, to pursue when you're in the modern age. You're trying to get subscribers. You're trying to get all sorts of things going. So for me, that's been the point of contention. And I think with blogs, you have to be current, and also being labeled. But I don't really see that now so much anymore. I feel like there's a lot of people that are doing what I'm doing, and I think you have to diversify in this industry. You know
Certainly.
what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm doing. But oftentimes I get to play a reporter, which is really cool. I was on this web series. It's a wonderful web series. You should check it out. It's called The Bay, and the people in it are soap opera actors. And it's amazing people like Ron Moss from Bold and Beautiful, Patrika Darbo from One Life to Live. They're great, great actors. And they basically, it's like a soap opera kind of thing that they're playing. And I was like a roving reporter in one episode. And the reason how I got that job is they saw me on the red carpet asking the questions. So I think in a way it's good. I mean, sure, you can get labeled, but it's good for people to see the different things that you can do and to put yourself out there. And you're quite the multi-hyphenate yourself, so I'm sure it's the same situation for you in some respects.
It is, and it's interesting because you have, of course you do the entertainment correspondence, but you mentioned all the other places as a print journalist that you've written for. Like you had mentioned, the Iran Times International, the Persian Mirror, the Namak magazine, stuff in the D.C. area, just all of the stuff that you've done. You've had the chance to interview and cover a lot of things that, the average person just has no idea, no concept of the amount of time and effort that goes into it. For you, do you find it more challenging to do entertainment reporting as opposed to world event, local event reporting? And have you ever been in a situation where you were interviewing or talking to someone and it, I don't want to use the word starstruck, but for, just for a second in your mind, you're like, oh my God, I'm actually interviewing X.
Exactly. For me, it's interesting. I feel like in D.C., it's a really tough town. I mean, it's really tough here too, but D.C., it's like you got to be like, you know how it is. You got to be like 150% legit. Like I got my start on Capitol Hill, and I feel like when I was working in a place like that, just to get a grant or just to work at a think tank or just to get some kind of an assignment, you got to be like too legit to quit. But when you're in L.A., there's like there's all sorts of people, right? And there's like now that there's there's the blogs and the whatnot. There's lots of people coming out of the woodwork saying they're journalists. And as you know, as an accredited journalist, and you write about horror, which I think is a lot of work because it's not just watching the movie, you got to critique the movie, and then you're an actor yourself, so you have an interesting critique. It's not like a typical critique. So for me, like the conundrum was, I'll go to these events and I'll cover them, and there's people that they write 2 sentences and they put filtered pictures, whereas I write like a novella. You know what I mean? So for me, that's the conundrum I'm in. Is I don't think between you and me and our viewers, I feel like journalists aren't taken as seriously now. I think there's been a big shift, into razzle dazzle. And that concerns me. And my other issue is that, and I don't mean to be a negative Nancy, it's just something I've noticed, because now I'm doing a lot of fashion and beauty and all that. I just wanted to try something new, and the tide was going that way for me. But I feel like it's a lot of people that are so-called experts. I mean, there are people that are experts, but I feel like just because some girls have a lot of numbers, it kind of overshadows everybody else. Like you can put in 2 filtered pictures and 2 lines, and then you call it a day. You call it a story. So I always want to give it 110%. I don't know. I don't think that's the case with horror writing and horror blogs because it's very in depth. And what horror movie is not full of twists and turns. But in my world, I think people can get away with a lot more. So that was a conundrum I was in a lot. And I feel like a lot of people call themselves journalists, but they don't really. It's not really like a journal of what happened. So it's different. I feel like where I grew up with is a different. We're from a very different place. LA is I think the most different place than Washington D.C. And I don't mean to complain and I don't mean to convince. I love the glitter and the glamour, but I feel like a lot of times in these press lines, a lot of the girls are asking what people are wearing when I remember I interviewed somebody that was like a 2-time Tony winner, and nobody knew this. So it's interesting to me what people know and what people don't know. That's been the biggest eye opener.
Has there ever been anyone that you've interviewed that you've just been like, oh my God, I'm actually talking to so and so?
I love the comedy people. I will say that I've interviewed many people. I've interviewed some pretty big stars, Oscar nominees, maybe an Oscar winner here and there. Yes, I did interview an Oscar winner, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Melissa Leo. They were 2 amazing Oscar winners. But I will say that what really impressed me, the people that I really adore are like, awards season. I'll get to interview like an Elliot Gould or Martin Landau before they come for the Oscar events. And that's incredible. Or, once I covered this movie, it was about a documentary about Everybody Loves Raymond being brought to Russia and the cultural differences. So I interviewed, I think it was something like called Finding Everybody Loves Raymond, or Everybody Loves Raymond in Russia or something. And I interviewed the cast, and I interviewed the producer, Rosenthal. I think his name is Bill Rosenthal, something Rosenthal. And I interviewed the cast. I barely got Ray Romano. Very little time, like 2 questions. But that Brad Garrett guy is hilarious. He gave a very funny, sarcastic interview. I loved interviewing Martin Short. I mean, there's just, the comedy people are amazing. Like, I don't mean to rag on the dramatic people, but the comedy people have really got it going on, and they're really, really funny. Culturally speaking, I have interviewed Shora Aghdashloo. She won the Emmy for House of Saddam, and she also was in House of Sand and Fog. She's in all these big movies. That was tremendous to see an Iranian woman, who's of such acclaim, and I've interviewed her on red carpets for the stoning of Soraya M. I interviewed her at a press junket. I've interviewed her, at charity events. And what I really admire about her is that she's ageless. May she be, much more mature and still be working. I find a lot of inspiration in that, not just as an actor, as a woman in this entertainment industry. So I feel like there's people that inspire me in different ways. It's very funny. I interviewed, I've interviewed so many people. I interviewed Miley Cyrus, which was great. This is when she was doing Hannah Montana. That was fun and funny. I think she had it was interesting to see how she's changed. She was, like the girl next door when I interviewed her, but I could tell that there was there's something fiery about her. And it's interesting to see how she's changed. But yet I love interviewing young actors and then seeing them grow, like a lot of these Disney kids, and then seeing them like evolve into big actors. I love seeing the evolution of actors. That's very exciting to me, not just as an actor, but also as a journalist. But, I've also covered a lot of cultural events. I've also interviewed a lot of people in fashion. I've interviewed Max Azria of BCBG. I've interviewed Sue Wong, who I like to consider as a friend now because I've covered so many of her events. But I love covering all kinds of things. I've covered the Festival of San Gennaro, the Cyrus Cylinder, the Chinese New Year and Chinatown is tremendous. Oscar events are fun. Emmy season is fun. There's a great little Hollywood museum. It used to be Max Factor Studio. It's where Marilyn Monroe became blonde and Lucy became a redhead. I did some great stories there. It was tremendously fun. Starstruck, I think for a moment we all are starstruck when we interview them. And then when you talk to them, you get these little gems from these people or advice from these people or stories from these people. But I really like there was one fellow I interviewed years ago. He did all the opening sequences of like Young and Restless with the artwork. And he was telling me a remarkable story about like Judy Garland, how he was the only one who talked to her. I mean, this man is like well into his 80s. Judy Garland was the only person, like she was at a table with all these executives and he was there and I guess they were doing some movie poster. And he was the only person she talked to and he's like, well, why aren't you talking to anybody? And she's like, they're not talking to me. And she's like, can you believe it? These grown men, these suits, they're afraid to talk to me. So I thought that was very interesting, hearing these old stories. And he's like, I have to tell you, as an actor, you probably have a great career in the 1940s. That's when brunettes were, on the rise, these clever, smart, sassy brunettes. But he's like, I don't know about you. Part of me thinks you're a very curious soul. You'd be a great Hedda Hopper. So it was great to, I love these old-timey Hollywood guys and gals. They're wonderful. So actually I had an event, and I will tell you, I was starstruck by Margaret O'Brien for Meet Me in St. Louis. She's a legendary Oscar award-winning actress. And she's more mature now, but she has so much grace. She has so much style. I was honored that she was actually at my event. I was awarded by the West LA Chamber of Commerce at Delphi Greek Restaurant. And she was one of the guests. And, I had met her before and I had known her, but I was very touched that she came. And I feel like the old Hollywood glamour people bring a lot of class and a lot of grace, and you don't really see that so much anymore. It's more of become a culture of how much skin we can show or how daring can we be. So when I see someone like her, it's really nice. The old Hollywood glamour is very, 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 very appealing to me. But yeah, that gentleman, like these old-timey Hollywood types, I love them. His name it's on the top of my head, I think, Sandy DeVore. He won an Emmy for his work, and he's illustrated people like Judy Garland and Liza. And for someone like and Diana Ross, and for someone like him to say that to me, I was like, that was like a big, that was very flattering. But yeah, lots of people are interesting. It's funny, I've interviewed beauty queens. I've interviewed Reverend Michael Beckwith. It's the whole kit and caboodle, I think, is what impresses me. But I really love the comedy people, like the Everybody Loves Raymond people. They're great. I just feel very blessed to have interviewed so many people. But it's been an interesting ride as a journalist and as an actor.
I would agree with that. I love talking to people that are current in the genre and are doing things now. But you're right, when you talk to some of the people that were involved in the early days that laid the foundation for the things that we see today, you're right. Some of the discussions that you have with these people are absolutely amazing. I would take it back to when I had Herschel Gordon Lewis on the podcast.
I love him. That must have been interesting.
Oh my God! And you talk about a guy who is just so intelligent.
I can
people
imagine.
hear
he
his
must
name.
know so much about your genre of horror movies. You must have had a blast with him.
Oh my God, it was amazing. But it's the stuff that he does outside. Like he teaches college courses on like finances.
Yes, I heard he's like whip smart. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was just absolutely stunning to have a conversation with that guy and to just not only hear the history of that, but how he was able to tie everything in financially and just from a business sense. So I really do get that. Unfortunately, a lot of the people I would like to interview have passed on, but there are still some out there that I'm trying to get to.
I'm sure you will. I mean, Herschel Gordon Lewis is a living legend. That's great that you got to him. And
my God, it was definitely one of the pinnacles of running the podcast. I can certainly say that.
Oh,
but
totally.
Now let's tie all this to your work in the horror genre. Now,
sure.
Most of my research led me through IMDb. So if dates are wrong or something, please feel free to correct me on any of this. But the thing that I found interesting was, and it seems to be this way with a lot of people who first break into the industry, you got your break in film in the horror genre. And the first film I would point to on your resume is 2003's Maniacal, which was directed by Joe Castro.
Mm-hmm.
And you played Nurse Number 2 in that one.
Yes, I did. Nurse Number 2, such a random role. I will say he's very good with the technical stuff. He's an expert effects makeup artist, and he's very talented at what he does. And I will say that it's been a wonderful road, and it's been great, and it's been really, I've been very humbled, and I feel very lucky, and I'll tell you why. I feel like a lot of these girls that I started out with, because I was always a friend of the girl that got killed. I was never the girl that was, like, naked or whatever, but I was always a friend of the girl that got killed, in this case, the nurse that got killed early on. And what I've noticed is, I'm still around doing horror, whereas I feel for a lot of these ingenues, I feel, I'm a character actress. I mean, sometimes I do leads, but I'm always like a character lead. And Samuel L. Jackson, they said to him, well, what are you? Are you a character or are you a lead? What are you? He's like, I'm a character lead. That's the best kind of lead to be, or some such quote like that, which I think is wonderful, and I think we should all aspire to be character leads. But, for me, it's great because, I'm still doing horror movies. I'm still in it. I'm still the character. Whereas it must be very challenging for those women. In the beginning, I'm like, oh, well, I don't have a lot of lines, but the lines I do have are pretty good, pretty juicy, lots of zingers. So for me, I feel very grateful for that, and that was a wonderful experience working with them. And, I feel like with horror, they always say, the acting coaches always say that, the best kinds of women are the ones that study musical theater. I think the kindest, the ones that are willing to deal with the most crap. I think the actresses that are willing to deal with the most crap are the ones that work on horror movies because it wrecks your voice. It's very low budget when you're starting out. I mean, it's still low budget, but it's extremely low budget when you're starting out. You've got to deal with all sorts of factors. You can only scream so loud if you're shooting in a neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley without people calling the police. Even if you let your neighbors know, there's so much nonsense that one has to deal with even making a film. So it's a true testament to how much you must love your craft to do this and to do horror film. I feel like the ladies that are the true screen queens, they've really gone through a lot to do what they've done. I also work with them on Near Death. That was a very well-written film. It was about a haunted mansion. It was the spirit of this actress that had died. That was very interesting. There's some really interesting, wonderful people in that. And then I moved on to more horror films. And recently I worked on Pond Scum with Mark Savage, who's an amazing indie called Australian filmmaker. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is just a delightful filmmaker, and it was great working with him on that film. And he knows so much about horror. He has a blog, I believe it's called Phantom of Pulp, and we've been friends for many years. And he would come visit me in the Valley, and he'd love to go get Mexican murder magazines because he it's very bloody, and he'd base a lot of his stuff that he would see in the images in his films. It's very bloody and grotesque. It's very out there. And apparently you can only buy them in Van Nuys, I guess, in the area in Southern California, and I don't live too far away from that. So, he's just an interesting character is what I'm trying to say. I'm really looking forward to working on Circus of Dread with him, Bill Oberst Jr., Donna Lee Heising. I'm very, very excited about it. He's wildly talented, this Mark Savage. He's incredibly, incredibly talented, and it's a carnival movie, so you can't go wrong with that. I'm very excited about that.
Well, since you went ahead and brought up Circus of Dread, the thing that I was excited about when I saw that you were going to be working on that film was you're going to be in that film with, as you had mentioned, Bill Oberst Jr. And Bill, I've been following Bill for a while now. Last week I just reviewed Deadly Revisions, which he had done with SGL Entertainment. First time
Gregory
Bill,
Blair, who's amazing, who I worked with on Natural Born Filmmakers, and Donna Lee, too.
Yes, and I have interviewed Donna Lee before, too, and I think she's an amazing talent.
She's very amazing, and she's so accomplished.
With Bill, the first film that really brought Bill to my attention was a little film he did with Billy Pond called Circus of the Dead. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of it, yes, because it sounds a lot like Circus of Dread.
Well, and when I first saw the title, my first thought was, oh my God, Billy's making this, Billy's making a sequel. Bill's going to be in it. Vita's going to be in it. This is can't miss. But I mean, I can't wait to see your interactions with him on the screen. Bill is an absolutely stunning actor. His acting in Circus of the Dead and Deadly Revisions are on different ends of the spectrum, but he's just one of those talents that I'm like, my God, why isn't this guy doing more?
He's amazing.
So I'm really looking
I feel like Bill's
that.
doing a lot. I feel like there's so many movies he's connected to or he's been in, and I know Bill is like is a friend, is a little more than acquaintance. I guess I could call him a friend, and he's wildly talented, and I'm very honored to work with him. And what I love about Bill is he really gets into character. I saw his one-man show, and it was absolutely amazing, and it made me more excited to be hopefully working with him. So I hope it comes to fruition. Circus of Dread. I'd be really, really honored to work with him on that one.
It's going to be amazing. Like I said, I can't wait to see your interaction with him on the screen. But one of the things I'd wanted to ask you is like I had mentioned, a lot of times when actors and actresses break in, they break into the horror genre. And, of course, your first couple of films happen to be in that genre. Were you a fan of horror films growing up, and what led to you getting those roles in those first two films?
You know, it's funny. When I was a little kid, I had a very unusual childhood. My parents are Iranian. Though I was born and raised here, it was after the revolution, and all these relatives and friends and family. I mean, it was a time of crisis would come into our home. So my parents would be very busy taking care of people, and my dad, I guess, kind of was like a mentor to young Iranians to get into colleges or graduate school or jobs. He did that gratis before the revolution in Iran for Iranian students. And then after the revolution, of course, it was very complicated. It was just a very dark time. And I remember my parents were so busy going to the airport literally sometimes twice a day, picking people up just as they came. And, you know, it's like a tribe culture. So I was often by myself, and I would watch a lot of movies that I had no right watching. I remember watching, because they would rerun these movies on TV. You know, this in Maryland, there's the big 80s. They play this promo, and it would be like a film projector, and it would say something like, I don't know if this happened to you in Virginia, the movies. Like, I don't know if you remember that, but they would show, like, these afternoon matinees, and I remember they showed, like, the Jonestown Massacre. I was very little, and I saw it. I was like, oh, my God, I can't believe I just saw that. And to this day, I'm still petrified of cults. And I would see, like, Helter Skelter as a child, like, as a really little kid all by myself. I mean, naturally, I was always petrified. But, you know, coming from my area, you know, what was really big, I mean, even though it was filmed many years before I, you know, saw it, was The Exorcist. The Exorcist is like a classic, especially where I grew up. So I feel like we had all these great things to watch and shows to watch, and, you know, I was allowed to watch these things. So I've always been interested in horror. I mean, from that ranging to the, Vincent Price era films. So I feel like I, you know, got to really watch a lot of things, and I was privy to a lot of things, and I guess I had very open-minded parents, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and I guess I had a real appreciation for the horror genre, and also I think it's a more open community. You know what I mean? There was much more to offer, and I think growing up in where I would see Channel 20, they show a lot of horror movies, and I think the guy that would announce it was Captain 20 or something, or they had another guy that was, I can't remember his name, but he would dress up like Dracula in a really cheap costume, and they would show like horror movies every Friday night, like, you know, 3D movies. You get the 3D glasses, you get like a slushie or whatever from 7-Eleven, and you can watch these movies. So I would watch a lot of these movies because of the Captain 20 thing. They would show all sorts of movies, different creature feature movies, all sorts of things. So that led to it. And like I said, the horror community is very kind and supportive, as opposed to, like, you know, breaking into mainstream film and TV. And I feel like people are very dedicated to horror films. Like when you're doing horror films, one is more prone to get a fan base, and one is more prone to be memorable, as opposed to, you know, I've had roles in TV shows, maybe not the biggest roles, but I'm more remembered for the horror film stuff that I've done. They're really rabid fans in the horror world, and I've noticed from my friends that are very successful in this genre that people like Bill, people see Bill, they go nuts, and it's understandable. He's a tremendous actor.
Now, something that you brought up, and I just think it would be an interesting side note really quick. You know, over the years, we've started to see more and more out of Iranian cinema. Not a lot that you see mainstream in the United States, but I've noticed that there have been more and more quote-unquote indie titles coming from the Middle Eastern section of the world. I wanted to ask you, in Iranian culture, you know, how are horror films viewed? Is it considered a taboo thing? Are we starting to see more of that coming from the Middle Eastern section of the world? What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting, you know, as much as the governments, well, I guess now there's a deal, but as much as the governments don't get along, the people do. And I think people in Iran love America, and they love American culture, surprisingly for most people, but it's the truth. And horror films are really big. I mean, there's illegal satellite dishes that people put up. I was actually in a horror short called Seeking Valentina, and it got international press, and it ended up being in an Iranian magazine. And what shocked me was, normally, because, you know, it's an Islamic republic, my lead, Kristen West, there's a picture of her on a red carpet. She's wearing an above-the-knee length dress. She's wearing a short-sleeve top in her dress. It's like a short-sleeve dress with it's above the skirt. And it's fine. She's not covered. You know, they cover it or they block out the face. They did not do that. They wrote about the film. I think a lot of they pick up a lot of stuff from American magazines. And I think there's people that are really into horror in Iran. They have a very supportive horror community there. It's not like it is in America, but I think people do love their horror and slasher films. And I think there's a lot of George Romero fans in Iran. So people definitely like their genres of horror. So that's opening up. But it's funny, since I've gotten back into indies and horror, I'm doing another short film, Strangers in a Book. That's a thriller. People in Iran were asking me about it. I've Christy McGinnity-Gibble from Little Women L.A., Jean Mack from Saw 6 is in it, Carl Bressler from The Usual Suspects, and again, Kristen West. And those films are going to be screening at the Action on Film Festival at the end of this month. So I'm very excited about that, and I've been getting a lot of support from the Persian community. Actually, they're interested in covering it, and you can even vote. And I love the votes. I'd so appreciate some votes. I've never been in any contest before, but it's a Bitly link, and it's bit.ly/Fantastic Film Fest, bit.ly/Fantastic Film Fest. So if I could get votes there, I truly appreciate it. But, yeah, I feel like doors are opening, and I feel like with, you know, mainstream-wise, with Asghar Farhadi winning the Oscar for Separation, which was an extraordinary film, and during Oscar season a few years back, I was lucky enough to have met him. That was great. But also, I think on an indie level, for sure, doors are opening, and you know, the dialogue has been opened. So it'll be an interesting time to see what comes out of Iranian cinema.
And the reason that I asked that, and the two are not directly correlated, but I'm a big fan of like death metal and black metal. I'm sure as you could tell from the music that was playing when you came on. Mm. And I had been reading some stuff about there's starting to be more and more of that style of metal coming out of those portions of the world. But I also read that when these guys do their shows and their concerts, that they have to be done in hidden, secure locations because now I don't know how true this is. I'm not rumor mongering. You know, if you can shed any light on this, but I've read articles where it says that if these people get caught doing those kinds of shows, that they can be put to death for heresy, and that's why I was inquiring about horror in cinema over there.
Well, I think it's a very hidden culture. Iranian culture it's very funny. I read this book years ago. It was written by a spy. I can't remember his name, but I can't remember the name of the book, but it's a really good book. And he's like, you know, Iranians are like an onion. You can try to peel as many layers as you can, but you can't really get to the core of them. It's because there's so much contradiction in my culture. You know, they love the West, but they're at odds with the West, right? Because it's the East. Right. They love freedom. You know, they tried to get their freedom in 2009, but you know, it's an oppressive culture. You know, my friends there that live there, they have incredible parties that we couldn't even dream of having out here, but you know, they have to do it in secret. So I feel like that there's a lot of that in the culture. And heavy metal has become very big. I have some friends in a band, and they're very well known, Arash Tarantiste. But there's lots of, there's the Metal Sanaz lady that I don't know, but we have many friends in common. It's a whole movement about heavy metal, and I feel like a lot of Persians probably like it because they get to vent their frustration at the oppression via the heavy metal music, because isn't that what heavy metal music is about? There was a great movie a few years back called No One Knows the Truth About Persian Cats, and it was a very sad movie because it was all about these Iranian filmmakers and the underground rock scene and what they have to go through. This movie did very well at Cannes, and it was a Batman Robadi film, but it was very, very tragic, what these musicians have to go to, and just to have a band rehearsal, it's so much drama to find a nice quiet place and to get through and just to be an artist is so confounding. But it's interesting. There was a billboard. This is what I think of when I think of Iranian movies. There was a billboard somewhere, and they took a picture, and it was in Time magazine, and they had a woman in a headscarf, and it said, per capita, Iran has more female filmmakers than any other country. So that's a big statement to me, that there's so many female filmmakers in such a repressive culture. I find that very, very interesting that they, it's like they're trying so hard, to break through, and I find that very encouraging and very inspiring. But yeah, what one thinks about Iran is so different. There's so many great documentaries that are coming out about Iran. There's one recently called The Iran Job about a basketball player, an American basketball player who, I guess he never made it to the major leagues, and he has to perform in Iran, and just how the people embraced him. And it becomes a story about humankind. Or Anthony Bourdain, the chef, went to Iran, and he said, there's the friendliest people there. The best hospitality he ever got in the world was Persian hospitality. So I think, hopefully things will change and governments will change, and it'll be a part of the human experience. But I do think that the music, I feel like the heavy metal music is like an outlet for the angst, I totally
see
that.
And
and I see it really coming out in many different ways, and I think there's different genres and subgenres of heavy metal Persian music. So I think that's truly interesting. Who would have thought in such a strict culture? But they go nuts for it.
Oh yes, I mean, trust me, there's some stuff I've heard from over there that I was like, holy God, I would love to see that played here.
Mm-hmm.
Bring those bands over here. I would pay and go see a ticket. The talent is absolutely amazing.
Wow, for someone like you to say that, then it must be. I've heard some of them, and they're quite catchy, and you really feel it. I mean, I feel like a lot of art comes from pain, but I know for them especially it must. I mean, you can't even have certain hairstyles. Can you imagine being a rocker and not being able to have a certain kind of a hairstyle because you're in an Islamic Republic? So it's an interesting time to see what happens with Iran. And I will say, as someone that's of Iranian descent, as an actor, it's been an interesting ride for me. I feel like when you're a Middle Eastern person, you always have to wear veils, which I'm fine with. You're playing a role, but I notice that women with the veil often get their lines cut. So it's been a very humbling experience. You feel like you're almost being silenced. But for me, I'm glad to be doing more mainstream roles. I'm hopefully in talks on doing a Western. I'm very excited to be working with Thomas Churchill. He's a very talented filmmaker. He just did this great film called Checkpoint. So I'm really excited.
He filmed that here in North Carolina.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, yeah. Oh, I've had Thomas on twice, and Thomas is an absolutely outstanding filmmaker. That is definitely a guy that you want to be working with. I can tell you that flat out.
I saw the Lazarus movie, and I loved it for so many reasons. He's a great filmmaker. He's a great storyteller. And I love his fascination with film noir. And I think he takes it to a whole other level. And I don't know if you saw Lazarus Apocalypse, but what really scared me was when they were, killing people, the scenes where everybody's, getting chopped up. They turned that to color. So it becomes even more horrific. The dramatic parts of the film become even more dramatic. It's like they're highlighted. But yeah, he's a great talent. I'm very excited about that. It's great to work on stuff like this because it's, oftentimes, one gets labeled. Or recently I was on Jimmy Kimmel, but unfortunately the sketch was too controversial to air. It was is based on a true story about websites where they, instead of having dating situations come out of it, it's a marriage situation. Problem in Iran is a lot of people would go under the table and date. They'd use these, just like here in America, it's like a dating website, but it would be like a marriage website. So it was a sketch based on that, and I worked with some amazing actors like Fahim Fazli, who was in Argo. He's going to be in the new film Rock the Casbah, but unfortunately the sketch was too controversial. It didn't air. So there's a lot of that in show business, and I'm sure you can attest as an actor yourself. But I certainly hope that it's not been so rocky for you. But yeah, it's been an interesting time, working in indie film and working in film and regular film and television. It's been quite a ride.
Well, I was going to ask you about film or for TV here for a second. You know, you were on Mind of Mencia, Green Manor, It Casting, The Mindy Project. For you, you know, do you prefer television acting? Do you prefer film acting? And what do you find to be the most interesting aspect of between the two?
You know, I have to say I love comedy, whether it's in film or whether it's in TV. The horror is great, too, because as you know, being a horror journalist, critic, there's a lot of horror films that are campy, and there's a lot of humor in horror, I find. I mean, it's gory, people get cut up, but there's a lot of sarcasm in horror. But I love comedy, whether it's film, whether it's TV. I love the beats of comedy. I love capturing the beats. I did a lot of improv when I first moved here. Upright Citizens Brigade, UCB, which was wonderful, and Amy Poehler of SNL fame was one of the founders. So I got to do a lot of games, and I think it's about the game of the scene. And in comedy, there's definitely a game of the scene. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's film or television, but I will say that there's a certain camaraderie one has working on an indie project because oftentimes it's so low budget. You know, you truly get to know people. So that's been a great ride. But yeah, I mean, I'm like I said, it just depends on more of the take of it. Like I loved working on Kimmel. I love working on Mindy. Mindy Kaling is a very inspiring woman. I didn't get to talk to her once. I actually did get to interview her soon after my job, and she's like, "I thought you were an actress." So it is confusing for people, but I will say that girl knows how to dress, and she's such an inspiration because, you know, she's not a size 2. She's not like a little blonde girl. You know, there's always a lead, you know, or she's not like your typical all-American lead. You know, it's not like Reese Witherspoon or Kate Hudson or Gwyneth Paltrow. So it was very empowering for me to see a woman like her. She was the executive producer. She was the writer. She was the director. I mean, she made the point of talking to every single actor on set, which I thought was lovely. But it was great. And you know what? She wore really tight clothes, and she didn't care. You know, this was like around 2012, 2013. The bandage dresses, the Hervé Léger dresses were in. You know, she makes a great point that you don't have to be a skinny mini to rock a style. You don't have to look a certain way to rock a style. And I missed your book signing, but I heard there were people waiting in the street early in the morning. I mean, one would never expect this, but it's so wonderful to have. And there's so many great women in comedy now, and there's so much great comedy. And I think a lot of it changed after that movie Bridesmaids came out. That really rocked the boat on things. And I think it really empowered women. And, you know, there's the Amy Schumer. There's so much going on right now for women. It's a very, very exciting time. And women in comedy is great. I just hope there's more comedies for women.
Oh, well, with the new Ghostbusters coming out, it should definitely be interesting to see where that goes.
That's, you know, it's so long overdue, and I'm truly so excited about that. It's going to be great to see. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's been an interesting ride because, like I said, I'm a journalist as well. And after the Chamber Awards, it's been great for my journalism career, my blogging career. I also got a Media Appreciation Award not too long ago from a fashion designer, Eugene Sidney. So that was great too. But I think it all goes back to comedy is where my roots are. I really wanted to work on. I mean, my ultimate goal was The Daily Show. I don't know how it's going to work with this new guy, but I think mixing, and I'm sure he's outstanding. But you know, there's only one Jon Stewart, but I think mixing journalism with comedy is something that I'd love to do. I've never really done that. I can be witty ha-ha when I've done my red carpet interviews, and especially if it's with a comedy person. And one of my most fun times I've had was with Finesse Mitchell from SNL or Martin Short, who's on SNL. But I feel like journalism and comedy is my next frontier. It's something I'd always love to tackle.
Huh. Well, let me get your spin on this. Since you've done several films in the horror genre, and of course, as a journalist as well, you know, you've been able to interview new Hollywood, you've been able to interview old Hollywood, things like that. You know, with women starting to have so much more of a prominent role, both in front of and behind the camera, especially in the horror genre, what are your thoughts on the evolution of how women have been treated in horror films, and where do you see it continuing to go?
that's very interesting. There's all these articles coming out, and I'm sure you're familiar with them about, gender inequality, and it's so true. There is so much inequality. But I feel like, I'll go back to comedy, and I'll go back to mainstream. We have people like Shonda Rhimes now. I wish there was a lot more of them, and there's great women in horror. There's Gail Ann Hurd. There's tremendous women doing great things in horror, and I think, it's not enough, but I think, we're at a much better vantage point than we were, I say 5-10 years ago. And I feel like women are not just dolls that are being, assaulted or, treated like playthings. I feel like women have become much more, roles for women have become much more active and multidimensional. And lately, when I go to horror film festivals and I check out movies, a lot of the roles, it harkens back to like the 80s empowerment of women. And I think it's because there's more female directors. I mean, maybe not the most per capita. I wish this country would speed up, but I feel like there's been some solid changes made. There's been some change. I mean, it's not as much as I would like, but there's been a lot of doors opening, which is great to see.
Now, two more projects I'd wanted to ask you about on your IMDb, and you had messaged me earlier in the day. I don't know if it's something you can talk about or something that you want to talk about. You were attached to Garden Party Massacre. Are you no longer attached to that?
I'm pretty much no longer attached to that. There was some scheduling conflicts and a few other things, but they're great. They're doing a great job. Gregory, as you can attest from Deadly Revisions, is very talented. Donna Lee Heising is amazing in it, and I can't wait to see it and check it out and show them my support.
And tell us some more about Natural Born Filmmakers, because I read the description of this film, and I was like, oh, my God, I've got to see this.
It's absolutely hilarious, and I'm not saying it because I'm in it. I love the different vignettes, but, again, it stars Gregory as well, myself, Donna, Demiziano Arcangeli, who's a very noted Italian actor. He worked with Fellini. He's in it. That was just a tremendous film. It was a spoof on, filmmaking and, distributors and just the filth of the show business culture and, like, the lowest amount of bottom feeders and karmic redemption, and it was all thrown into one, and it was great working with people, and Steve Oakley did a great job. It got nominated at Action on Film Festival. So it was just a tremendous experience working with Steve and his wife, Melinda. So that was a great experience. Rather Melanie, sorry, getting my M's confused. But it was a great experience working with these guys, and Steve had 3 cameras running at once, and he's like, imagine you're on a sitcom set. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So it was great working with them, and the day I shot, I was in Orange County. Unfortunately, Donna wasn't in our scene, but, such a trooper. She, was always there, as an extra ear, and it was great to work on that project. But, yeah, I played Babette, like a very sassy secretary, so it was a lot of fun. I play sassy secretaries, but this one was really over the top, so it was quite fun.
Now, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is that you're producing your first documentary, The Real Shahs of Beverly Hills.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that project.
That came about years ago, and it's one of those things, most things in this town take years. That came about years ago when the Shahs of Sunset first aired, because I don't know if you were familiar, a lot of prominent Iranian Americans boycotted the show. So it's all about, just because you're Iranian, it doesn't mean you're a certain way. It's all about breaking stereotypes, and all the amazing, so many amazing tales of Iranian Americans who've become successful, like the guy who created Tahari or the guy that created Bebe. Like these people, they become wildly successful, and it's not just all about the bling, and it's not just all about the, having the fancy car and the Beverly Hills lifestyle. What they're trying to convey is that through hard work you can go further. And they interview a lot of people in education, philanthropy, all sorts of different things. So I think that's very important.
Now, you've done so much as a journalist. You're definitely you have your foot out there in the film industry. You're working on projects that you love. You're doing the things that you want. First off, as a journalist, is there a topic? Is there a person? Is there a dream project for you as a journalist that, you're just dying to do? What would it be?
Well, I guess as a journalist, probably something like The Daily Show. I'd love to be a expert. When something bad happens, like some celebrity does something silly, and they bring someone on as like an expert, or maybe even a fashion expert on like an e-show, that would be tremendous. But for me, it's like I find with the journalism, it takes up so much of one's time. I recently started a blog, SoVeryVida.com, and I love it, but it takes up so much time. I guess whatever I'd have the most time for.
Now, what about a dream film project? If you can be involved, as much as I dislike remakes, I always ask this question. If there was a remake of a film that you could do, what would it be and why?
Remake of a film. I love The Shining. I'd love to be the wife in The Shining.
Ah.
But like a low budget, I'm Jack Nicholson, that's like, come on, that's like another stratosphere. I love The Shining. I love those old horror movies. I love The Shining. I love The Exorcist. I love Carrie. Carrie's been redone, but like a modern-day take on these would be so interesting to me. I love the classic horror films. But, I feel like I said, with horror, you do so much for so little that it would be worth it to me to do like an indie version of all this stuff.
Now, you've done a bunch of voiceover work. What do you think about doing voiceover work? I know I've noticed a lot more recently guests that I've had on, more and more people are doing voiceover works. It's becoming, it's always been popular with cartoons, but nowadays you're seeing more and more big-name actors getting involved with video games and the stuff, including people like, John Malkovich and people like that. What are your thoughts on working in voiceover?
It's funny. Voiceover I had a great start in. I still do it when I can. Mostly got my start in commercials, industrials, and narration. And recently I made my animated voiceover film debut, and it's hitting the festival circuit in Lovesick Fool. It stars, or rather is voiced by Fred Willard, Lisa Kudrow, Janine Garofalo, and me. I had a really nice supporting role in that film, and I had another role that I voiced, angry art gallery hipster girl. So, but in addition to being the dream girl, so it's nice to be the dream girl. What I love about voiceover is that there's really no discrimination. You're not discriminated by your age. You're not discriminated by your type. I could play someone much younger. I could play someone much older. So that was quite nice. I really enjoy voiceover, but seeing a film that I worked on and with such big names in it and seeing it screened at a film festival in the Chinese theater, that wasn't even on my bucket list. So it was very exciting to work on that. I love working on animated films. But, as you mentioned, the celebrities, it's getting harder and harder for us, middle-class actors or whatever we can refer ourselves to get the jobs we want to get. It usually goes to name people, so that's very challenging.
I would agree. I've never done any voiceover work, but I definitely think it would be a lot of fun. It would definitely be a different aspect of the genre to go over. Well, we're right here near the end, but, before I let you go, tell us about some upcoming projects, both in film and writing. If you have something you're really excited about coming up, what should we be looking for?
Well, I have a fantastic film festival coming up. I have 4 nominations coming up, and again, I'll mention the bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/Fantastic Film Fest. I'm very excited about Seeking Valentina, Strangers in a Book. I'm actually up for Best Actress for Strangers in a Book for a short film, Best Supporting Actress for Seeking Valentina, and a couple other noms. My film Strangers in a Book won Best Guerrilla Short Film at Action on Film Festival, which was great. Lovesick Fool is still hitting the festival circuit strong. There should be some more announcements soon. And Seeking Valentina is going to be screening at the New Delhi Film Festival in India. It should be screening in Europe. I'm excited about that. Excited to be working with Thomas Churchill. And I have some other projects I really can't get into, but I also want to do some of my own projects, like my own family story and, a documentary on my dad. He lived to be over 100, and he was a NASA scientist. And also, my blog is keeping me very busy, SoVeryVida.com. That's SoVeryVida.com. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at my name, Vida Ghaffari, Vidaghaffari, like Frank, Ari. And it's been a tremendous honor to be on your show, especially because you're in the horror genre, especially because you're a Virginia peep. Woot, woot, Virginia.
Well, I was very honored to have you on. It's very refreshing to talk to someone who is on both sides of the spectrum like I am. It's like we had mentioned earlier before. Sometimes, acting comes naturally to an actor, but public speaking, actually talking about their work and expressing what it is that they do and their motivations behind it, I think sometimes for some actors that can be a very intimidating experience. And I just want to let you know it was extremely fluid with you. I mean, there was never any pause, never any hesitation, and I appreciate that as a fellow journalist. It's nice to get straight answers and an insight that you don't always get from people that you interview and have on the show. So I thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. I'm honored and humbled, and keep up the great work. And thanks again for the interview. I'm so pleased. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
The same with you. If you ever have any other projects or anything, we're friends on Facebook. Let me know. You're always welcome on the podcast. If you have news about stuff that you need to go out, let me know. I can get it up on Horror Society.
Thank you so much. I'd be so honored. Thank you so much. What an honor for me. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
You too, Vida. I hope to talk to you soon.
For sure. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, that was actress, producer, and writer, and journalist, Vida Ghaffari. Make sure to check out her amazing work, especially the upcoming Circus of Dread. I cannot wait to see her acting with Bill Oberst Jr. That is for sure. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to do our second digital dismemberment review. We are going to be reviewing Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of the Human Centipede 2, part of the Human Centipede box set, the complete sequence. But before that, we're going to go into our final Metal Massacre Spotlight for the evening. Once again, with World Podcast exclusive music. The name of the band is Denner Sherman. The name of the CD is Satan's Tomb. And the song is Seven Skulls.
Take a look and see.
world podcast exclusive music. Dinner Sherman from the new CD, Satan's Tomb. The name of the song was Seven Skulls. Once again, head on over to Metal Blade Records. Find out everything new that is going on with the band. Pick up the newest CD. Find out about touring, band memorabilia, CDs, and more. You can also pick up all of the other amazing music available from Metal Blade Records. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time for some digital dismemberment.
Digital dismemberment.
And in our second digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening, we are covering Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Human Centipede 2 from the Human Centipede Complete Sequence box set. And once again, we are going into some very graphic material in a movie that, admittedly, I enjoyed quite a bit. A lot of people probably don't like this film and are angered by it, but they can bite my ass as far as I'm concerned with that. To give you a little bit of an idea, of course, as I had mentioned last week, upon its release, The Human Centipede became a cultural sensation. Now get ready to experience the complete sequence of the notorious Human Centipede series, including unrated director's cuts of the first two films. To give you a little bit more background on this film, this is a 2011 Dutch black and white exploitation film written, directed, and co-produced once again by Tom Six. This is the sequel to The Human Centipede, which was out in 2009. The film stars Lawrence R. Harvey as a mentally challenged Englishman who watches and becomes obsessed with the first Human Centipede film and then decides that he wants to make his own centipede, except he's going to go bigger than 3. In fact, he's going to go 12. Included in his fiendish plans is bringing in actress Ashlyn Yenny, who was in the first film. Now, this film had a lot of controversy surrounding it. It was originally banned in the UK by the BBFC. It was eventually granted an 18 certificate after 30 cuts were made to the film. The film was also banned in Australia for a short period of time, and it is outright banned in New Zealand still to this day, as far as I know. A lot of people got on it for the over-sexualization and excessive violence and gore in the film. And basically, the film opens up in the toll booth of a parking deck. And a young man by the name of Martin Lomax, who's played by Lawrence R. Harvey, is actually watching The Human Centipede on his laptop while he's working. He is a very short, overweight, asthmatic, and you would guess mentally challenged or at least emotionally stunted. He lives with his mother, who's played by Vivian Bridson, and she basically blames him for his father being put in prison for physically and sexually abusing him as a child. He's seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Sebring, who's played by Bill Hutchins. And you can kind of tell that Dr. Sebring is a little bit off himself, as he touches Martin all the time and prescribes him several very heavy narcotic medications. When the doctor comes to visit, Martin takes great glee and pride in feeding a giant centipede that he keeps in an aquarium in the living room. As part of his plans, Martin keeps a notebook with different pictures and drawings from the original Human Centipede film. In order to do what he needs to do, he winds up acquiring a warehouse and kills the guy who's going to lease it. And he starts abducting people for his own human centipede. Most of his victims come from his job. He kidnaps a young man and his girlfriend, two drunk girls who catch him masturbating in his office with sandpaper. He captures another gentleman and his pregnant wife, and they also have a toddler, which Martin kind of keeps hidden in the garage with him. He also winds up killing a psychiatrist in Cabby. Psychiatrist having sex with a prostitute. And you actually hear Sebring talking about how he wished Martin was who he was having sex with. There's a point in the film where Martin is having dinner with his mother, and the neighbor upstairs is playing loud music, and she bangs on the floor with the broom handle, and this big, really large, heavy-set gentleman in tattoos comes down and basically beats the hell out of Martin when the mother says it's him complaining about the music. Well, Martin eventually gets into it with his mother after she destroys his scrapbook that she finds under the bed. He bludgeons her to death with a crowbar, and, I mean, he just cavemans this woman's skull. The neighbor upstairs starts playing music again, so he sets his mother up in the kitchen and bangs on the ceiling to get him to come down. And he comes down, finds the corpse, and Martin winds up taking him hostage as well. His final victim is Ashlyn Yenny, and she's the girl who played Jenny in the first film. And somehow he manages to get a hold of her agent and convinces the agent that she's trying out for a part in a new Quentin Tarantino film. And it seems like without any kind of looking into by the agent, she flies out and Martin picks her up and kidnaps her as well. All of his victims, of course, are in the warehouse, and he has brought knives and tools from his mother's house to start doing his centipede. So after he starts knocking out all of the people involved, he severs the tendons in each person's knees to keep them from running, and he uses a hammer to knock their teeth out. And it's pretty gruesome how he does that. There's one person in particular you see several times he smacks in the face with a hammer and pulls teeth out. Not quite having the scientific knowledge or the medical knowledge to do it quite how the doctor did it in the first Human Centipede, he makes a medical mistake, and when he slices the buttocks open of one of his victims, he causes them to bleed to death. So instead, he uses a staple gun and duct tape to attach each person's lips to the next person's butt. During that process, the pregnant woman appears to drop dead. So Martin puts her in a corner and covers her and makes a 10-person centipede with Ashlyn being in the front. Martin starts doing all kinds of weird experimentations on them. Ashlyn continues to scream the whole time, so he tears her tongue out with a pair of pliers. And then he wants to have them go to the bathroom. And since he can't force Ashlyn to eat, he injects each person with laxative. And in a truly scene of grotesquerie, there's just diarrhea and everything going on with everybody. Becoming aroused to the point of no ending, he then wraps his genitals in barbed wire, and he forcibly rapes the woman at the end of the centipede. And as that sequence finishes, the pregnant woman wakes up and runs screaming outside in labor, and she makes it into the car and gives birth to the child in an extremely graphic sequence. And in that particular scene, the baby winds up being killed in an extremely gory manner after she stomps on the accelerator, which crushes the baby's skull, and she escapes. Martin, beyond pissed off at this point, goes back inside and sees that the centipede has managed to separate itself. He's so pissed off at this point that he starts shooting all of the victims. And when he runs out of ammunition, he uses a knife to slit the throats of the remaining victims. Ashlyn is the last one, and she punches him and grabs a funnel and jams it in his ass and drops his pet centipede into it. In anger, he winds up stabbing her in the neck and staggers out, basically leaving her for dead. The movie ends with him back at the toll booth watching the final credits of the first film on his laptop. And in the background, you can hear the toddler that was left from the beginning of the film crying somewhere in the background. Again, Tom Six went on record as saying that he was going to make Human Centipede 2 just over-the-top, graphic, bloody as hell, and he certainly does that in this film. Overall, I would give this film a 3.5, 4 stars. This is certainly not a movie for anyone. If you're squeamish, stay the hell away from this one. I'm just telling you up front. But it is 10 times what the original was. Weak stomachs do not need to apply here. Overall, I found the acting to be extremely competent. I thought the camera work was fine. I thought the makeup and special effects work was amazing. And something we'll talk about here with the special features. On this one, there is a color version of the film. Now, the first time I had ever seen the film was in black and white, and it was amazingly haunting to see it in black and white. Let me tell you that it goes to a whole nother level seeing this film in color. It will absolutely blow your mind away. Including with the special features are audio commentary with Tom Six and Lawrence R. Harvey. There's an interview with Tom Six. There's a tour of the warehouse set. There is a audition tape from Lawrence R. Harvey. There's another Foley session, deleted scene, a making of the poster, and there's a new alternative poster gallery, theatrical trailer, teaser, and promo. As I said before, this box set is a 10 out of 10. I don't think you will ever get a more definitive version of this film and all of the special features included with it. It is just an absolutely stunning box set that if you're a true collector of these films, this is what you need to go out and get. It's been an absolutely amazing show, and I wanted to fill you guys in on something that is going on tomorrow. We are bringing another new show onto Horse Society Radio. Now, this is a once-a-month show, so it'll probably be about the third week of every month. But make sure to tune in tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern on Horse Society Radio for the first episode of our new monthly show, Grave Discussions. And on the premiere episode of Grave Discussions, I, the Dead Man, of course, of Horror Society, Living Dead Magazine, and of course the host of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast, will be joined by my fellow co-host, Chris McGibbon, who, of course, is the host of Creepshow Radio, sometimes writer at Horror Society, and the man that brought us the Video Dead to Blu-ray with Scream Factory. And we will be discussing the current state of the horror industry, and that will include films, directors, subgenres, music, and more. To add to it every month, we will add a third host, and we will be joined by our guest and fellow horror aficionado, Brian Harris. He's previously been a guest host on Creepshow Radio and an occasional guest host on Horror Society Radio way back in the day when Rob Dimension was still doing the show. He's also authored 9 books, including Gimp, The Ripening 1 through 3, and he's the co-publisher and co-author of print magazines Monster and Wings Chop Magazine. So make sure to tune in and listen to great discussions on horror. You can certainly follow this show on iTunes as well as Stitcher, just like you can any other show that's on Horror Society Radio. So once again, make sure to tune in tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for our new monthly show, Grave Discussions. Well, like I said, I think it's been an absolutely stunning night. I think it was a great show. I want to say thank you to Metal Blade Records for sending us Denner and Sherman's Satan's Tomb. Make sure to head on over to Metal Blade Records so that you can pick up your copy of this, find out when the band's touring, merchandise, and find out about all the other great bands available through Metal Blade Records. I want to say thank you to Jeremy Swanson and all of the great people at SGL Entertainment for sending us our Blu-ray copy of Meet Me There for review. Thank you to our friends at Scream Factory for sending us the Human Centipede, the complete sequence box set where we covered the Human Centipede 2 this evening. Make sure to pick up the latest edition of Living Dead magazine, which should be hitting the streets any day now. I know it's been delayed a little bit. I know there are people that are waiting for their copies. Joe, Michelle, if you're out there listening, I had spoken with Deanna, and I know that you guys will be getting copies for promotional purposes because I know you guys wanted copies for that. Make sure to tune in next week as we will have another interesting guest. I don't want to give away anything just yet, but it will be something to die for sure. And until next week, well, no, I can't even leave without saying this. I want to say thank you, profusely thank you, to Joe Williamson and to actress, producer, writer, and journalist Vida Ghaffari for coming on and talking. You know, a lot of people may have looked at this episode as not one that was so much horror-heavy, but the way that I see it is Vida has so much to share with us, not just her experiences in the industry, but her experiences as a journalist. And I really appreciated her insight and all of the things that she brought to the show this evening. And once again, Vida, you are always welcome on the show. If you ever want to come back on and talk again, I would love to do a sit-down, in-person interview and just pick your brain one day about journalism and film. Maybe we can get Joe to set that up. So until next week, ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, your head undertaker, the dead man Michael Jones of HorrorSociety.com and Living Dead Magazine. Wishing you all a good night and telling you all to rest in peace.